From Eyewitness News, this is Newsmakers.
This week, union leaders came out swinging against the Chafee-Raimondo pension reform bill.
I am not sure how we will survive.
The bill calls for a potential 19-year freeze in cost of living adjustments, or COLAs, for retirees in the state pension system. But it's also drawing complaints from some local leaders who handle Rhode Island's 36 independently managed pension plans. Their complaint is just the opposite. By not giving mayors and town managers the legal right to freeze COLAs for city and town retirees, they say the bill could make their plans go the way of Central Falls. This week on Newsmakers, opposing views on the controversial plan to help local pension plans, Warwick Mayor Scott Avedisian and Cranston Mayor Allan Fung.
Good morning. Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. Joining me on the panel, Eyewitness News analyst Arlene Violet and political reporter for Rhode Island Public Radio, Ian Donis. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mayor. Thank you very much for joining us on the program. Want to cut to the chase first and foremost before we dive into the nitty-gritty of the non-MERS pension aspect. Overall, it's safe to assume that both of you support the state side of the pension reform plan, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Non-MERS pension plans, as we pointed out in the open, are in deep trouble. Mayor Avedisian, your city is dominated by them, and Mayor Fung, you have feet in both waters. The big fight of the COLAs at the State House, is that the same in your cities? Are COLAs as big an issue? Mayor Fung, we'll start with you.
Absolutely. COLAs are a very expensive proposition, and one where it has to be addressed equally. And that's what many of the mayors, from myself, Mayor Tavares, and many other town administrators as well, are arguing for. You can't have comprehensive pension reform and leave out on those local plans at least a $2 billion piece of the problem. And COLAs are definitely one of the reliefs that we're asking for to be put on the same footing as the state.
What have you done before all this? I mean, you're looking to Gina Raimondo and to Lincoln Chafee to help your city get out of the sticky mess that you're in. Have you tried to get those out of the collective bargaining agreements before we've gotten to this point?
And we've actually had that fight in the city of Cranston back when I was on the city council and Mayor Laffey was in office. We tried that COLA fight on a local level through ordinance, trying to reduce that COLA benefits, and we lost in the Superior Court. And Providence tried it as well, and they took their case up to the Supreme Court. What we're asking for now is that's why we need the help from the state leaders, that extra recognition of the dire circumstances that we're in, giving us, even if it's enabling authority, that extra argument and help that we can take when we go back into court on the COLA suspensions.
I know Arlene's going to have a legal question about that, but before we get to it, Mayor Avedisian, you're kind of on the opposite end of this.
Well, I don't disagree with what Mayor Fung and Mayor Tavares have said. However, for Warwick, it's very different because we have in our pension plans, our 4 non-MERS plans. 3 are well-funded, 1 is not. But the provisions of those plans say that there is no automatic COLA, that there's a self-correcting mechanism in there that if the market doesn't do well, our employees don't get a COLA. If the market does well, then everyone shares in what goes on in our returns each year. So that the COLA issue isn't necessarily the same for both of our communities. So I don't disagree that they're looking for relief, and I hope that they get it, but I just think it's important to show that we're in a different position than some of the other communities.
The treasurer and obviously the governor think that they've gone as far as they can legally, because it's one thing to change the statutory entitlement versus the collective bargaining issue that you gentlemen confront. Do you have contrary legal opinions that they could have gone farther than they have? What have your lawyers told you? Or are they fundamentally correct as they say they are?
I would disagree. I think that they can go even further, that public policy, public interest type argument to help save these plans. And the retired teacher's case that was written by Justice Flanders was when he was on the Supreme Court, who's now the Central Falls receiver, had very strong language that just because it's in a contract doesn't necessarily mean that it's in perpetuity. And what we are asking is that extra recognition, that extra ammo if we have to go into court, so that we are not put behind the 8 ball, so to speak, because it's just in a collective bargaining agreement. And we need help. We need help from the state. We're not trying to pawn anything off on state leaders. What we are saying is we need that extra help
What would
for
that
the COLA
extra help
fight.
look like? If you pointed out Providence already lost the COLA fight, you lost the COLA fight, so what would that extra help look like?
First of all, basically I can put it into 3 R's. Recognition from the state leaders that many of these local plans are in dire circumstances. That recognition is that public policy argument that we can make to help save these plans. Relief from the COLAs, just like what they're doing on the state level. And the third thing is, on a go-forward basis, for future collective bargaining agreements, set these limits on the collective bargaining agreements and even interest arbitration awards so that they don't go further than the retirement benefits offered by the state, so that you have uniformity and stop this fighting across cities and towns.
Let's talk briefly about each of your most troubled plans. Mayor Fung, you have one locally managed plan that's about 16% funded. Mayor Avedisian, you have one that's about 26% funded. If the COLAs for those plans could be frozen, what difference would that make in bringing those funds to a healthier funding level?
Well, again, ours is predicated on if the market does well, then the employees do well. So it's not going to be an automatic change for us right off the bat. For us, we, about 19 years ago, 18, 19 years ago, started a 40-year funding formula for that one plan that was underfunded. So we're in year 18, beginning of year 19 of that fund. So we've been putting in what we need to put in for the last 18 or 19 years. So we're in a little different position. We're not going to see an automatic savings. We'll see a cost avoidance, I would call it, not a savings, on the teacher side, so that we will not be looking at needing to pay an additional $7 million next year. But from the city side, there's going to be no automatic immediate savings that we're going to see. So, as Mayor Fung said, he's tried to do things one way. We tried to do things differently. We went to our council last year and got them to pass brand new pension plans that take effect next July, so that we're looking at it from a perspective motion to say, starting next July, this is what the new pension plans are going to look like in the city. So we just have different ways that we're trying to solve the same
Mayor
problem.
Fung, you have that old plan that's 16% funded. How do you get that into a healthy state?
The COLA is one of the big ways that we can get some funding in the assets, so you don't have to pay that COLA. I had my actuary run these numbers, and when you take a look at a 5-year, 10-year, or even 15-year freeze on that COLA, not taking anything away, but freezing it so that they're not getting any more, it would reduce, for 5 years, $32 million on my total liability. For, I think, 10 years, it goes up to close to $50 million, and for 15 years, $60 million on your total unfunded liability. That's a huge savings, and when you translate that to what it means towards your annually required contribution, for the 5 years, if we freeze it, about $3 million a year. For about 10 years, about close to $5 million, and for 15 years, close to $6 million towards your operating budget.
You had said that if the plan isn't fixed and they don't shore up the non-MERS aspect of the reform, that taxpayers are really going to take this thing on the chin, and you were critical of General Treasurer Gina Raimondo for that. She told WPRI.com reporter Ted Nisi that Mayor Fung is, quote, 100% wrong. She goes on to say, why wouldn't we work together with Allan Fung to come up with a buyout scheme for his closed plan? And we should point out that a closed plan, of course, is people that it's no longer enrolling new hires, right?
Well, I guess the question I have for the treasurer is, why wouldn't she listen to the recommendations that Ernie Almonte and I put forward about the benefit side? We spent the summer on that pension advisory group putting forward what we think would save many of the cities and town plans. And on the point going forward, a lot of what is currently in the reform legislation is nowhere near what we had asked for, because the way I see that current part of the bill, it's like the governor's original mass proposal, which I was critical of when he put it in the budget, on steroids. It's a funding proposal. It does nothing for the benefits reduction side, which has to be an equal component of it.
Well, what about this here? She's saying that, look, we're not going to leave you out to dry here, Mayor Fung. We're going to work with you to come up with a way to fix it. We're not going to let the taxpayers sync on this. What does closing out or a buyout scheme sound like to you? I mean, does that sound like the old Laffy cut a check, thanks for playing?
That's what it sounds. That's what it sounds like to me. Just basically shutting the plan down, giving, if the retirees are lucky.
And your thoughts on that are?
You know, that's something that we're going to have to consider if the current proposal goes through, because I cannot afford over that 10-year period under the formula that she has devised, and I've run the numbers with my finance director, at least $95 million over the next 10 years.
What's your position on your union firefighter head, Paul Valletta's comment that Gina Raimondo has cooked the books?
The numbers are the numbers. And even in the city of Cranston, on the rate of return, for Cranston, I have not done that actual experience study yet. We're set at 8%, not as bad as what the state was in some of the other communities, but I've been waiting to see what the standards might be, because that's something we definitely have to get the right numbers in order to do it, and I think the state had to do what they did in reducing it towards that 7.5%.
So is he wrong? Is he wrong?
Yes.
Is he wrong?
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I think there's no cooking the books. There's definitely no cooking the books. You know, when you're talking about numbers, you have to get the most accurate numbers so that you have the right problem to be addressed with the resolutions.
In fact, for the first time in many years, we're finally getting the real numbers and getting a real idea of what the enormity of the process really has to be. And I think now each city and town needs to do the same thing. And we've started that. We changed our assumption rates to match what the states had changed their rates to. We have the same actuarial company, so it's very helpful to have them looking at different data with the same set of eyes. I think one of the biggest issues has always been that cities and towns have gone out and hired actuarial companies or auditors, and there's really no standards as to how you report, so that what looks great in one community is totally different in another community. So if we can have some uniformity on that as well, we'll get a real picture where every city and town stands.
One element of the Raimondo-Chafee approach on local pensions would require an actuarial review, of which the state would pay half the cost by next April 1st. Concerning the sorry state of many of these local managed pensions, isn't something like that justified, Mayor Fung?
Oh, absolutely. Actually, we run an actuarial report every single year. Some communities, I understand, don't. And you really need a good picture every single year of where you stand, because there could be shifts in the claims that you paid, in the funding ratios, which could have an impact on your annually required contribution and your total liability.
Right, and also you need to not only have the correct figures, but you need the real picture. Most communities haven't updated mortality tables in years, and in fact most communities probably don't even have one. So we need to all be on the same level playing field to understand where everybody really stands.
Mayor Avedisian, one last question before we go to a commercial break here. You mentioned in an earlier answer that you are on a 40-year plan that was launched by former Mayor Lincoln Chafee to shore up your plans. The thing that I'm curious about here is, how can you guarantee that that plan isn't going to be muddled by future mayors?
Well, that is a major concern, and I know that when he put his plan together 17, 18 years ago, we had a long discussion about how do you codify it in our city ordinances that this is a bill that you have to pay. There's still some concern that future mayors down the road might decide not to fund it. And we have been meeting with Suzanne Greshner in the Division of Municipal Finance on ways that you can really shore that up so that it is not advisory only, that you really have to make those kinds of contributions. And she has some ideas as to what we can do. We're going
that could set a dangerous precedent, couldn't it? I mean, setting up massive power for a previous mayor and overreaching their power going forward.
Well, I think if you have a 40-year plan that's been approved by a council and funded, the question now is how do you make sure that it continues to get funded? And we're working with her on a number of different options to make sure that someone can't just get rid of that idea as we go forward.
Okay, we have to take a break here, gentlemen. When we come back, we are going to ask Mayor Avedisian about his trip to Turkey. He was there when the earthquake struck, and of course we're going to continue our discussions on pensions. Stay with us. You're watching Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. To my right, Arlene Violet and Ian Donis. Our guests this week are Mayor Allan Fung from Cranston and Mayor Scott Avedisian from Warwick. Arlene.
Mayor, disability pensions again reared its head this week with a well-known lawyer getting his law degree paid for by taxpayers, but he continues to receive a tax-free pension because of a disability. What exactly is your position? What are you doing, for example, to wean out disability pensions that no longer belong? Mayor, you've been in office for 11 years. Have you ever proposed legislation, you know, the so-called healthy body, as long as you're able to do something else, they should be modified? So are you looking at the problem in your city? What steps are you taking? And where's the legislation from either of you to change it?
Actually, when Will Smith was the city solicitor for the city of Warwick, we embarked on a brand new disability pension review process that has dramatically reduced the number of disability pensions, especially in police and fire.
For the future, or those presently in the range?
It's already reduced some, and what we have now...
Hold on, this review process means they go to a doctor...
3 doctors.
They go to 3 doctors to ensure that they're still too injured. So when you say dramatically reduced, Providence has been able to overturn a single disability pension using that formula.
Well,
how many are we talking about?
If you've already been awarded the disability pension, it's going to be hard to go in and take that away from someone. We've set up a process where our independent medical examination process is much more stringent.
But dramatic reduction, he asked you about. How many did you get off the rolls as a result of that?
We're probably
process?
down 18, maybe 20.
Is that percent or numbers?
Numbers.
Okay.
Yeah, do you believe the formula should change, that if you can be gainfully employed as a lawyer, for example, even though you can't throw somebody over your shoulder as a firefighter, should it be changed? And what are you doing about that?
Well, one of the things we did with the ordinances we sent to our city council last year was to change the notion of the 66 2/3. You start getting that and you keep getting that until you get to a point where you would have normally retired, and then it moves to a regular 50% pension.
Pawtucket uses that plan.
And that's where we got it from, talking to Mayor Grebby, and thought it was a great idea, and so we stole that from him and put it into...
That's former flag.
Absolutely.
And, you know, for us, we're in a different scenario. Many of my employees, police, fire, anyone else, but police and fire in particular, are part of the state disability system, so they're, you know, they're in there. I only have probably about 55 more active employees in that closed system that are, you know, that we do the similar type, you know, independent medical examination. We have an outside company that really reviews and scrutinizes on the front end, because as the mayor indicated, once you get it, it's so difficult to, you know, take it back, as we've seen in Providence and some of the other scenarios.
So does that go to the issue, though, that the formula henceforth should be just changed?
It has to.
It has to be, absolutely.
You know, and I think people are really starting to get the notion that there has to be change here, that you can't keep just talking about what you might do to make it better. You know, when you look just mathematically at the numbers, in the last few years, both cities have gone to their active employees and said, we need you to give up more as we're trying to change our budgets. Mathematically, I don't have enough active employees to give up enough to pay for all the other issues for the retirees. So mathematically, it's impossible. You have to make some major changes.
Treasurer Raimondo and Governor Chafee had a very sharp dispute about whether to include the locally managed pensions in the pension overhaul bill. Is that going to muddy the waters and make it more difficult to pass this pension reform, or are you confident that this will be resolved? Mayor Fung?
Pension reform has to happen, and for it to be comprehensive, it has to include those local plans, because you cannot leave, and we were talking about the numbers, a $2 billion problem. That's probably understated, because many of these cities and towns haven't done the updated actuarial experience studies that, you know, the state has done. So you can't leave that big of a piece and call it comprehensive, and the taxpayers at all levels, from the state to the local levels, need reform.
My concern is that if you try to have one bill that has every nuance for these 30-some-odd individual plans to fix whatever the problem is comprehensively like that, that it makes it too much of an issue for the General Assembly to approve. And so we've gone back and forth on a number of different issues here.
And I respectfully disagree with my older gentleman here. But quite honestly, I think it can be done in a simplistic way, and, you know, we will be presenting some amendments that can work for cities and towns, even if it's enabling. It doesn't have to be to the point where the General Assemblies, and we're not asking the General Assembly to be the bad guys, make it enabling so it is a local issue.
Well, I'd love to see the amendments that you come up with.
Sure, absolutely, Mayor.
Part of the pension reform plan would raise the retirement age to 67 years old, and I'm wondering if that would actually have an adverse effect on your budget. This has been brought up at the hearings that the longer a teacher has to stay in the job, the longer they collect at the higher step for a salary, correct? So what about that argument that this actually in the long run might be more burdensome on your overall budgets?
Well, I think you have to look at the things that offset that. If you have someone who serves 20 years in a position and retires versus them staying 30 years and retiring, the 30 years means that there's one less person in the pension system to begin with, and those 10 years mean that they're already vested. So you're going from 2 covered lives in a pension system to only having 1. So you really have to offset the long term. Yes, they may go out at a higher pay scale because they've been there 3 years at the higher rate, but you don't have another whole body that's already in the pension system. So it's easy to say that the longer they stay, the more it's going to cost for each individual to get out, but I think you need to offset that from the number of people who aren't entering the system.
And what you also have to take a look at is that cost avoidance with the reforms that are going to happen. Say, for instance, in Cranston, we are going to be saving with the teachers, you know, from comparing those top steps that we would be paying as part of operating, avoiding probably a $6 million bill. That's a real savings in cost avoidance of that increase that we would be getting.
Analysts have talked about the fact that a sleeping giant is the medical insurance liability.
Absolutely.
Have you gentlemen calculated that? What does that look like? And as you know, this legislation does little to address that.
Right. I have supported a move by the Interlocal Trust to become the fiduciary agent for all cities and towns on OPEB issues. Currently, there are a couple communities that have set up their own OPEB trusts. I'm not sure that we need to have 39 separate entities out there. It would be better to have one group who already has a proven track record of 25 years.
Have you calculated what the liability is for you because of past contracts, present contracts?
Yeah, it's in excess of $270 million.
And how much is Warwick actually tucked away for that 200?
Zero. We have a pay-as-you-go.
Yeah.
So.
See, for us, we actually started a trust and proactively started to fund some of it. For our police and fire OPEB liability, it's about $50 million. The teachers' portion is about $35, so it's $85 million for us. What's fortunate for the city of Cranston is we don't provide any other retiree health care for any of our other employees, so it's not as big of a number as Scott's, but it's still a problem.
What have you tucked away?
Right now we have about $400,000 in our trust, but it's slow.
Mayor Avedisian, Channel 12 pollster Joe Fleming found that you might have been a tough adversary for Senator Scott Sheldon Whitehouse. Excuse me. Why did you decide not to run? And in the 1st Congressional District, will you be endorsing Brendan Doherty?
I decided not to run for the Senate because I don't think it's time to do that, and it just wasn't what was in my makeup to go do that at this point. And yes, Brendan is a dear friend. I've known him for many, many years. I like John Laughlin very much. I supported him last time. Mayor Fung and I went to events for him and had a fundraiser for him. But I've known Brendan a very long period of time. So when the timing is right for him and he wants me to come out and endorse him, I will do so.
How about Barry Hinckley?
I've talked to Barry quite a bit. I have not talked to him in probably a couple weeks, but I have no reason not to support Barry and to be out there and do whatever I can for him.
I'd stick with you for a moment here. You were in Turkey when that massive, I believe it was 7.2 magnitude earthquake struck. Luckily, you weren't anywhere near the epicenter, correct?
Right, it's about 200 miles away. I was in a city close to the Syrian border, Diyarbakir. I was there for the reopening of an Armenian Apostolic Church that had been closed since the genocide in 1915. And actually, I was in meeting with the mayor of Diyarbakir when his staff came in, turned on all the televisions, and told us about the earthquake in Van.
And what were you seeing there as far as a response? Did the mayor there start shifting public safety services up to where this happened?
They weren't, because it's a 6-hour trek on back roads. There's no major highway system from Diyarbakir to Van, so you're talking to go the 200 miles, more than a 6-hour drive. So what they were trying to do was figure out how they could get money to the Red Crescent, the Turkish equivalent of the Red Cross, to do that closer to Van instead of trying to transport stuff there.
Were the airports mobbed when you tried to leave?
They were not, but remember that happened on Sunday. I did not leave to go. I left to go to Istanbul on Monday morning, so I don't think that people were trying to get in or out at that point. They were still trying to assess damage.
Gentlemen, I'm sure you would say that one of the best ideas Mr. Chavy has had is the pension reform. What's been the worst idea, Mr. Fung?
As far as the pension form?
No, anything that he's done. What haven't you liked that he's done?
Well, the proposal on the mass was definitely one that I was critical of in the pensions. His budget proposal on the tax increases, certainly from a fiscal standpoint, I'm a little bit, conservative and worried about, those types of discussions when you
Mayor?
get funding.
Avedisian?
I can't point out one particular thing that I would disagree with him on.
Not even the sales tax
No,
resurrection?
I mean, I have some concerns about bringing that back on the table when it's already gone through its depth. I'm not so sure I would have brought it back out and put it on the table. I guess my concern is we've had a major change in the way that they're dealing with cities and towns, and I think that's really good. And my concern would be that needs to continue. And there's been an open dialogue thus far, and I hope that they see the value of that.
Speaking of Governor Chafee, his name was totally absent from a New York Times story last week on Rhode Island's pension problem. Was the New York Times right to give single-handed responsibility to Gina Raimondo for tackling this problem and driving it forward? Mayor Fung?
About 30 seconds.
No, actually, I think the governor deserves credit too, and he's on the right side with the inclusion of locals, so I definitely think he deserves credit to be part of that as well.
Avedisian?
I think he deserves credit, and I also think that the Senate President and the Speaker of the House, who have called their members back in and are really pushing an expedited time frame on this, deserve credit as well.
You both wringing your hands over potential snow this weekend?
Yes.
No, absolutely.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us on the program. And if you missed any of it, have no fear. It's on our website, WPRI.com. There you can also check out our pension coverage. Be sure to watch, click on Nisi's notes. Ted Nisi has been doing a spectacular job, a real retirement plan rock star, if you will, covering all the pension hearings, and he wrote an article, Pension 101, to get you up to speed there. Again, thank you for watching, and we will see you next week on Newsmakers.
Good.